coaches. Thanks for joining me for another Modern Soccer Coach interview. Today we're joined by Jake Henry, Head of Coach Development at Notts County in England. He's also had a similar role with Nottingham Forest. He's going to talk about a brilliant topic: how to manage coaches, how to help develop coaches, how to support coaches. You're going to love this if you're into coach development, coach education, if you're director of coaching and you work in that support role as well. I think there's a ton of information here that will really help. If you enjoy the interviews, please like and subscribe and we will keep them coming. Thank you so much. Here's Jake. Enjoy. Jake, thanks so much for joining me today on the Modern Soccer Coach podcast. Really excited to have you on.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it, Gary. Really looking forward to it.
Before we started recording, I just said to you there, I can't believe I haven't done this topic, and the amount of friends I have that are DOCs and leadership positions, especially in the US. Hopefully we'll go into a little bit more depth and detail of the differences in the types of roles. But definitely overseeing this element of coaching, there seems in my eyes to be a growth in this over the last 5 years, 10 years in the game at youth levels today. Why do you think it's a big priority for clubs?
You're right. There's been a huge push over the last sort of 5 or 10 years, particularly here in England, with the progression of the academy system. I think, I'd like to think it's been a recognition of the fact that a big thing I talk about is better coaches make better players. It's as simple as that, really, for me. Who are we to try and expect the players to develop and grow and thrive in the environments they're in if the coaches can't as well? I think it's a recognition of coaching as a profession as well, that people have been able to see that there's a real career pathway within coaching at various different levels across the game, all across the world, to show that these people need development, these people need growth in themselves. And rather than you have coaches who might be part of the program or part of football for 10, 15 years, and then obviously life becomes chaotic and life overtakes sometimes, and how are we supporting those people to still continually grow and want to be part of a football environment? I think that this sort of role is a reflection that we're working on that, and we're trying to make sure that we recognize people rather than just recognize the fact that kids and players like playing football, but there's a human element to this as well. So yeah, it's the huge progression in this country in particular, for people outside of England, has been the implementation of the head of coaching role across academies all across the country. So every professional football club now has the head of coaching role, and their primary function is to develop the coaches and develop the program that was initially supported financially by the Premier League, and now is a requirement for every club. But we're supported by the Premier League with our development as well through the elite head of coaching program, which is a fantastic program. I'm in my second year, and that's been running for a decade now. Fantastic program. So there's a lot of progression definitely been made. But yeah, like I say, I think it's a reflection of the whole coaching profession rather than it just being something that we think should be done. It's recognizing this is a career path for people.
Yeah, and as we move forward in the conversation, it's probably worth establishing initially is that it is a coaching oversight, coaching development. You're not a DOC that's taken 2-3 age groups and doing 5-6 different things, right?
Yeah. So my role in particular at the moment, overseeing the whole coaching program. So everything from sort of the coaches that work with 7 or 8 year olds all the way through to coaches that are working with 20, 21 year olds on the periphery of our first team environment or in and out of that. So all of those coaches, which for me is nearly 30 coaching staff, a mixture of full-time staff and part-time staff that balance that with other employment. And so that itself brings challenges. But yeah, rather than concentrating on just like a small few groups and thinking about what those teams look like, it's more my team is the coaches and they have then their players to work with, is essentially the way it works.
All right, $1 million question then. How is success measured in that there if you don't have any teams?
Yeah, great question. And I think this is the beauty of the role in that every individual success is different. So some people will have success in mind that is within your football club, and that's fantastic. You can help them achieve that. You can help them grow towards that if that's realistic for them as well. So they might have a certain goal of becoming, they might be a part-time coach, they want to be a full-time coach, and they want to achieve a certain qualification by a certain point, whatever that would be. You might see some success within that. You might see some success with people who go on to achieve things elsewhere. So that there's those elements of success, and you can measure those. Obviously, if you're really clear on people's development action plans. But I think the other area of success, ultimately, although I am coaching the coaches, the success is the players developing and the players growing, and that level of success. Because if I'm able to help the coaches get better, they can then help their players get better. Their players get better, they grow, they go through systems, they end up with careers within football, wherever that is in the world, at whatever level that is. Or they go on to achieve other things. And hopefully you hope that the impact you've made on them as a person through the coaches has allowed them to go and progress on a different level as well. So defining success is difficult, and it's different for every person. And that's what's great about the role, that you can decide what success is alongside somebody else. I think the difficulty for somebody in a role like mine is to tell people what their success is. Some people need that. Some people need to go, no. Success for you is doing this or achieving this or sustaining yourself where you are as well, because that sometimes gets overlooked. Whereas some people come to you and go, success means this to me. And then, brilliant, that's a challenge for me. How do I get you there?
In these podcasts, we've done how many episodes we've done on culture and team culture, but you're establishing a different type of culture, I'm guessing, with self-development, curiosity, level of engagement around getting better and progressing. Well, first of all, like how would you describe the culture you're trying to build with the coaches? And then second of all, like what are some keys to building that?
So I suppose for me at the moment, with where I'm at, it's aligned to our club, which is great. We're trying to build a learning and development culture, regardless of whether you're a player who comes into us for an hour a week or you're a coach who works here 100 hours a week. Hopefully they're not working 100 hours a week, but you get my point. We allow, well, what we're trying to do is create this thirst for knowledge, and people want to learn and want to grow. Big thing for me is that in terms of developing that, I'll produce a development program for everybody. So a development program that would include all staff. So that will have everyone within the academy program would be part of that. But then also a development program that's individual to them. And then my encouragement is to then essentially get them to come to me. I have a certain amount of time that I would say, this is for everyone, or this is for a certain group of you, for whatever reason that is. And then there's blank time, and that time's available. So if you want it, come and get it. Because we talk to players, don't we, a lot as coaches about, well, who are the players that are out doing extras, like after training, or are going out on their day off, or who wants to eat right and drink right and sleep right? And we profess all of this as coaches, but what about us as coaches? So what about the coaches who want to read, want to watch things, want to listen to things, want to go and watch other people work, want to take themselves out of their comfort zone? They're the ones, hopefully, that will approach somebody in a role like mine and say, how can you help me? Or I really want to get better at this. And then I can go, great, let's do it. Let's put something in place, and let's find something that helps us to do that. So it's a little bit of give and take. It's a little bit of me going, this is really good for you all. This is a really good way of doing things for you to learn, but also trying to encourage them to come to me or come to somebody like me and go, right, come on, I want a bit more than this. Which is a difficult balance to strike. But if you recruit the right people, you have the right people around you and the right people in your environment, you tend to find that you have those conversations more informally than you ever realize. And sometimes sitting down, for example, preparing for this, I started thinking about some of the coaches that I work with at the moment, or I've worked with in the past, that are those coaches that come to you, and even ones that still text you now or call you now to have a conversation, rather than it being like you're having to chase them. They're the ones that are really pushing themselves and are really developing. And that's really pleasing to see when you see that.
So consistent with players, isn't it? So consistent. Yeah.
We're all people, aren't we? So if we ask the players to do these things because they're human beings, we can do the same with coaches. It's learning is learning. The context is the only different thing. That's the way I see it anyway.
Yeah, brilliant. The development action plan, then let's go into that there. So that's something that I'm right. You started at Forest, and you're also doing it at the role at the minute at Notts County. That's for every coach at every age group.
Yeah. So as part of what the role is within the Premier League clubs, every coach needs a development action plan. So that allows them to understand what they're working towards. What I've tried to do over time is make this a living document. Now, learning isn't linear. Learning isn't getting from A to B all the time. We need to find a space to recognise that learning takes place in different ways for different people at different times. So there is a plan, a document that's in place. But essentially, after the first conversation, every single coach's action plan is different, because everybody's got different things they need. Everybody's got different things they want. Everybody's got a different speed at which that can happen. Everybody's got different time that they can lend to these things. And I think for me, it's important to recognize that even if I feel they need to get better, for example, with their technical development on the grass with the players, in terms of really delving down into small technical details, they might not be at that place yet. So it might be about putting that within their action plan, that's something we're working towards, but what's the step before that? So then being able to work with them to put something in place to know that we're working towards something, we're working towards where we want to get to. And a lot of the work we do here at Notts now is around the North Star model. So for those who might not be aware, it's essentially a development model where everybody has a North Star. So the ultimate end point, the place they'd really like to get to, the place that they would feel would be, that's it. Then when you talk about success, I've achieved, I've got where I want to go. Now, for some people, that North Star might be something that's aspirational, and they may never achieve that, and that's okay. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you know what that is, and you know the sort of direction you want to go in, you can start to understand what comes before that. And if you break that all the way down to what you need to do day to day, so here and now, tomorrow, what do I need to do? The small detail to start myself on the path towards what my North Star is at the end, then that's where the learning takes place in the middle. And it becomes messy, it becomes chaotic, but it's real. And so I felt that as coaches, we need something that reflected that. So it's something that I can contribute to, the coaches can contribute to. If we need to, other disciplinary staff can contribute to. So it might be within the sports science department or recruitment or wherever it would be, if they've done some work with them. It's very much a document that's living and breathing, that allows them to see. Hopefully there's like certain checkpoints that they've been able to go, if they look back at it and go, oh, actually, like 2 years ago, I said I wanted to get towards my North Star in, I don't know, 3 years. I'm 2 years down the line and I'm still actually right down the bottom, affecting my day-to-day things. So then you can start having a conversation about, right, how realistic is that North Star time frame now? So what do we need to do to alter that? And what do we maybe need to do in the middle? Is it me as a coach developer that's not impacting things day to day for you? Is it you? Do you need to maybe make some alterations to be able to impact that? Or is the direction between those 2 points changed? Do we need to go somewhere else? in order to get there. We're all used to like bumps in the road for players. I'll relate it to players again. We talk about manipulating players' development journeys to give them bumps in the road, to make things difficult for them. I'm not saying I do that for coaches, but we predominantly as adults compared to children have bumps in the road a lot of the time. We have lots of other things that we're trying to deal with. So sometimes the bump in the road does put a little stop for a while, and that's all right as well. So we have to be able to recognize that within people's learning and people's development. So yeah, every coach gets that. And like I said, after the initial conversation, when we build that, after that, everybody's completely different. So it makes that difficult, and it makes that a lot of work. But I think that's reflective of those individuals then.
Yeah, probably to the detriment of coaching. A lot of young coaches start off looking at being Pep or Jose in 10 as quick as possible. But you mentioned there about having the technical competency or whatever that is. Do you have something to say, like, let's say there is a young coach that says, listen, I want to be a first team coach. You know, what does it look like at that North Star? Like, how many boxes need to be ticked? Or can you give us an overview of that?
It's not necessarily about like ticking certain boxes, but we try and focus like really clearly on what we can affect day to day. So day to day, the process, what are we actually doing? Our processes impact our performance. So then usually positive performance over time allows us to achieve another level. So that next level might be a certain position or a certain qualification. That's more of a tick box point that we need to get to unlock the potential to get towards the North Star. So let's use your example of somebody starting out wants to work in first team football. Absolutely nothing wrong with that aspiration whatsoever. But in order to get there, they need to hold certain qualifications. They're going to have certain experiences. There's also a knowledge and understanding that we're going to need to build our network and understand who the people are that might be able to help us get there. Understanding what that actually is at that level. What is that job? So I think some people see it on TV, or they'll hear it on podcasts, and they think, wouldn't first team football be great? Isn't it brilliant? But then some people, when they get near it, the reality is that it's so all-consuming in their life that it's not something they actually want to do. So sometimes being able to go through this process allows people to go, actually, I really like working with young children, or I actually like an environment where it's competitive, but it's not in the spotlight all the time. And it might be in the spotlight from time to time. So for us, that might be professional development phase football, so under 18s, under 21s, or B team environments, where it's competitive, it's league based, there's cups, you might get some social media attention from time to time because of that if you do well and things like that. That might fuel the ego slightly, but actually allows people to say whether this is it for me. I like this is really good. So now I'm here. My North Star was that, but now I know what that is. I'm actually going to refocus myself. So rather than trying to say that you've got to go through this level and this level and this level and this level to be able to get where you want to go, I try to look at four things. If North Star's at the top and things you're doing day to day are at the bottom, what are the two things in the middle that are influencing that? Because otherwise we can go after so many different things, and we try and be the best at everything rather than focusing on what might make me have some form of expertise in a certain field. Does that help? Does that contextualize that a little bit better?
100%. It's just fascinating because, like, you're right. As you go up the ladder, dynamics change. You get a little bit. It's like going just another height of elevation where you're like, oh, the air's a bit thinner up here, and I might not be suited to that. But you've also got less control probably as you get on up. You know, you've got certain environments you think are champ manager, and they're it looks more like the Sunderland documentary. You know, it's really tough space to operate in. So it's interesting to see how you work on that. But I like that. So you're saying there is almost like you keep the process, and you keep them on that there, and then you have the conversations around that then allows them to adapt and hopefully gain a better understanding or awareness of who they are.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the most important thing. There's always going to be a more formal side of coach development when you're looking at qualifications and things like that. That's where your more tick boxing exercise comes from, because in order to gain a qualification, you have to show certain competencies and certain abilities and like variety in what you do. So I'm there to support that side of it, and that for some people fuels them really, really well, because they're able to see something happening and they're able to go, oh no, I can do that, and that's written down there, so I can do that. But actually the softer skills, I don't really like that term, but the bits that you are, like you said, you're talking about, it's more informal, it's more feel, it's more understanding. That's much more difficult to put down on a piece of paper or on a plan with somebody, but it is something that's really powerful when you sit and have a conversation with someone over a period of time and go, do you remember when we had this conversation a year ago? You said this to me, and use their words, and they go, wow, okay. Like, and it's that sometimes, going back to one of your earlier questions about success, that it's hard to quantify that as success. But actually having that conversation that's the little bit of light bulb that makes someone go, oh, okay, like I am making progress here. I am growing. I am developing alongside my more formal things that I'm doing. That's probably, for me, that's where the most powerful things come. Again, if we want to relate it to players would see being retained each year, going through the age groups, and getting a contract when they're professionals, staying within their role, getting a new contract, being paid more money. That's your tick boxing, going through that sort of more formal side. But scoring more goals, more assists, etc. They're all things we can do. But what about the way that they receive the ball, and they're able to maybe manipulate their body a little bit better than they were a year ago, and we're able to show them video to show, well, remember we talked about dropping that left shoulder just a little bit more because it distributes your weight a little bit differently, right? Well, look at this clip. Now look at this clip. That takes time. That can't be done in it. And we know this as coaches, but sometimes we don't apply that same logic to us as individuals in our own coach development. So that's probably the bit that's the most difficult bit to do, but it's the most exciting bit as well.
It's the most difficult bit by a mile, I'm thinking, because coaches are really, really good at assessing players, but not as skilled as remembering how they assess them at certain times and relating it back to themselves. Like, oh, this is what you said 2 years ago. Like, that could even be, this is what you said about player X 2 years ago, and you don't even remember that there. So I guess how do you balance there between support and almost truth telling? You know, like that's got to be.
Yeah, of course. There's a time and a place for being able to say, look, I need to be the person who says something that you might not want to hear. Again, we'll say that to players. Unfortunately, we have difficult conversations with players at times. So sometimes we have to have difficult conversations with the coaches, of course, and that striking that balance and saying, look, okay, I know we're on this path. I know we're trying to grow wherever we want to go, but this isn't good enough. Like there's a standard here. I think being able to be really clear within your club about what the standards are, what your values are, who you are as people, that's what you can always lean back on. So if we're not meeting our own standards, or there's something that's really clear within our own environment, again, going back to something you mentioned earlier, culture, then you should be able to check and challenge that within your own staff anyway. The utopia for me as a coach developer is that I hear and I see the coaches doing that to each other, because it's who we are as a club, it's who we are as people, that we're able to have those conversations amongst ourselves without it becoming confrontation, with it just being taken in the right way and being able to go, okay, yeah, I can see that that's where you're coming from. That's your perspective, and that's fine. Obviously, sometimes I have to have those conversations, and yeah, they are more difficult, and that's where you go back to that balance of wants and needs. Some people might want to work in a first team environment, as you alluded to earlier. What are they able to do? That is a different conversation. And if they're not able to do it now, are they able to do it in the future? No one ever really knows, but there might have to be some difficult conversations in the here and now to say, well, I don't think that's realistic at this moment in time. So where are we going to go that's realistic for you? Sometimes that means that you and that person and your club don't align anymore. And that's okay, because there'll be an environment where that does work. But sometimes for me, the people who are really trying to grow themselves and are really trying to learn as a coach won't like it, but they'll take a little bit of time to take stock, reflect, think about themselves, think about the conversation, maybe come back, have a bit more of a conversation to learn a bit more about it, and then go, okay, great, now what we're going to do, and embrace whatever comes next. So yeah, that's really difficult, really, really tough.
It's fascinating that it's also a role of, like, you're almost a positive disruptor, because as coaches then and as adults, like, yeah, we're human. And as you get in a job and you work in that job for 10 whatever years, or a few years even, you start to get in your routines and become comfortable in your salary, your day to day, whatever that is. And you can, as a coach, you can rinse and repeat for years and years without understanding that, hey, the game's moving in this direction. So I'm sure that helps, even check-ins and having that there to be like, listen, we're always moving here. Because if you didn't have that, who would do it for you?
Yeah, and I think that's part of it for me, that I try and reflect back on maybe where I was at the start of my coaching journey and think, would I have liked someone doing that to me? And that's I'm trying to be somebody who I would have liked. And I understand that means that not everybody's going to like me, because we're all different people. But it's exactly that if you think about you, if you had that person in your life at some point, the positive influence they had on you, you might not have liked what they said at the time, or it might have had some difficult conversations at some point. I've had people who I recognize as friends, really close friends, and mentors within the industry that I've had conversations with, and at the time thought, I really thought you believed in me and that you thought that this was something that I could do. And now I look back at that conversation and go, no, they did believe in me and they did think I could do it, but they had to have a difficult conversation with me. And like trying to break somebody from, like you said there, with consistency in their lives. Like, you can come into an environment where people have been for a long, long time, and they like the way things are, and they develop players in a certain way, and they might be slightly resistant to something new and something a little bit innovative, a little bit creative. Ultimately, they get left behind by the industry, not by me as an individual or by anybody else, but the industry will eventually leave those people behind. One of the coaches springs to mind for me that I worked with, who's been at the same club for probably 15 years now, pretty much in exactly the same role for that amount of time as well, but is at the forefront of what that club's trying to do, because he's constantly evolving and pushing himself and trying to learn and trying to understand. So there's not a breakdown of, well, I've always done it this way. Because if we always produce players, well, they go back to the players analogy. If we keep coaching players the way we've always coached players, then the game doesn't move forward. If we coached players now in 2024 in the way we coached players in 2014, 10 years ago, we're doing them a disservice, because we're producing players that aren't fit for what could be the modern game moving forward. So us as coaches have got to be reflective of that. We've got to see that, well, okay, what does a coach look like at the level I want to be at in 10 years' time? What could they be? What could they be looking for? What are the skills I've got to go out and find? What are the tools I need? Like, who do I need to know? We'd expect the players to do that. So again, we have to do it, don't we?
Yeah, just when I was thinking about my own experiences there, and like how many people, it's very, very difficult to get feedback as a coach, particularly as a college coach. When I was in the college space, your athletic director and the people above you are normally not soccer people, so they don't really understand the context of what you're delivering, how, blah blah blah. I went to an event. I delivered a session at this event, and there was a guy there. If I remember right, his name was Keith Mincer.
Yeah.
He's from England.
Keith Mincer. Yeah.
And he asked if he could watch my session, and I was like, "Aye, fine, of course." And then at the end of it, he stood around the players, and he just put his head down the whole time, and I thought it was really bad manners that he wouldn't even, he was kind of dozing off, or he wasn't really engaged, or whatever he was doing. But he was closing his eyes, and he was listening to real intent and deliberate about how he was listening to the points I was giving. And then, of course, afterwards, he was like, "Listen, can I grab a coffee with you?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." And it might have been the most powerful feedback I've ever received. Like, he kindly opened my eyes to words and mannerisms and how I was presenting stuff. But you go away from that, you think, imagine if you were getting that every week or once a month, Jeez.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's like, for me, that's a great story. It's a powerful one, because I really resonate with that. That's our role. That's a coach developer's role. And to say, and sometimes some of the coaches want, what was my session like? Like, what? Oh, did you see when I made this progression? Or when you're watching the game, oh, do you remember I made this substitution and I changed the system and then this happened? And then I might go back with, yeah, but did you see what happened to him over there? And they're like, pardon? Well, did you see the impact it had on the player that you actually took off? Did you see the impact on the way that you addressed it to the team, and the way that they really buy into it straight away because of the words you use, like you said, the mannerisms you use, when you're progressing a session. One of the biggest things you see a lot, and you might recognize this as well. A coach will stop a session and you see a player on the other side of the pitch throw his arms in the air or get frustrated, and the coach hasn't seen that because it's 50 yards away and they don't know it's happening. But for me, that's my role to see that, and then maybe understand why that happened, and maybe have that conversation with that player. And then if it's right, relay that back to the coach and maybe have a conversation, understand their reason for stopping the session at that point, or making the change that they made, or saying something the way they said it, hearing their point first, and then go, well, here's just another opinion for you. Here's something else to look at. And like you said, if you're able to have those conversations more and more, then that's the informal stuff. That's not something that you're going to write down. It's not something that you can say, oh, well, I need that in my development action plan. That's the bit where I talked about feel earlier. You have to feel the sessions that you're in, feel the games that you're in, and that, because emotion comes with that. And that's where you're able to give those elements of feedback. I'm in no way trying to say I'm anywhere near that kind of level of being able to get that sort of feedback from you and say, like, it really opened my mind and things like that. That's fantastic. If you have someone that can make you feel like that, ultimately as a coach, for me, that's what you should be looking for. You should be looking for that person that can get you to that place, because that's what helps you grow and what helps you develop.
Yeah, it can be tough, because sometimes that's coaching. Sometimes you're realizing that everyone's agreeing with you because of the dynamic that you're making all the decisions and picking the team. So once you get someone who can provide a deeper insight in a role that's, hey, listen, there's 100 things that you could tweak here and take in different directions. I just think that's amazing. Well, just on that, what you mentioned there about not critiquing the session, but I did want to ask about methodology, like how much of your job, I know there's no exact answer to this, but how much of it is, assessing whether people are implementing the methodology and the playing philosophy and all that versus those little nuances that you talked about there?
Yeah, it's a really, really difficult part of it because everybody does it differently as well, particularly at the clubs here. Again, some people will take notes as they're watching. Personally, I'm not a huge fan. Again, this is just my opinion because I didn't like when I was coaching seeing the guy stood in the corner with his notepad writing notes. I didn't like that. I try and be, if I can, a boots on coach developer. So I'll put my boots on, I'll stand next to you and I will go, what am I here for? Do you want me to coach in your session? And then I get a feel for what it's like to coach within your session. If you give me a certain thing to do you want me to be that little person on your shoulder, just listening to those little conversations? And then I might step forward, give you a question to think about and step back again. Do you want me to do that? How do you want to utilize me when I'm on the grass with you or on a game with you? How do you want that? Then, so that's it, sort of like in the moment. But then from assessment's a really difficult word because we're not necessarily trying to achieve something. So the way I like to do it, I like to use the term catching coaches in. So we always talk about catching people out potentially. I like catching them in and going, right, well, that's a really positive reflection of our game model or our methodology or our language that you're using there. So for example, I might film their session, mic them up so I can hear all the little drive-by conversations they're having with the players as well. Send that to the coach afterwards so they get the chance to watch their hour 90-minute session back and have some thoughts themselves. And then what I'll do is I'll do some data feedback for them. So that will be focused around our language as a club. So we'll have within certain moments, we'll want to use certain words. That's the bit where I was talking about earlier about aligning the program all the way from those 7, 8-year-olds up to the 20, 21-year-olds. But the language is what does that. So how many times, if they had a certain focus for their session, were they using the relevant language within that? So the players can recognize that. So that gives them actual data to go on. Also gives them data around what type of coaching interventions they make. So are they being quite direct or like command style with them? Is it question and answer? Is it observation and feedback, trial and error, guided discovery? Not only that in terms of how they say that, but what type of intervention was it? So was it a global intervention? So if they're doing 11v11, they've got 22 players on the pitch. Did their intervention affect every single player? Was it a global one and everything down to like 7v7, so 14 players, for example? Was it an intervention that went to a unit? Was it an intervention that went to an individual? Was it an intervention that stopped the practice or didn't stop the practice? How much time did it take them to move from one practice to another? So when they think they had a drinks break that lasted 30 seconds, and everyone goes, "God, 30 seconds is on my watch." And then 3.5 minutes later, the practice still hasn't started. But in their head, they've said 30 seconds. So it's 30 seconds. The data doesn't lie that says, well, you said 30 seconds, great. But so where did the other 3 minutes go? That was 3 minutes of playing for those players and coaching for you. And then on top of that, what type of feeling did that interaction give them? So was it positive or encouraging? Was it negative? So that would be, so both of those are both verbal and non-verbal communication. So their body language, are they folding their arms? Are they clapping their hands? Are they throwing their arms in the air celebrating? Are they throwing their arms in the air? They're frustrated at the referee. And yeah, so positive, negative, and encouraging, like which area does that communication fall within? Within that, they'll get sort of, if it was a 90-minute session, a 3-minute highlight video of things that are positive that catch them in. So things that they're working on in their development action plan or things that align to us at the club. And this all kicks out into one page, basically. It's one dashboard that gives them all that information in one go. So we've done the session together. They've then watched the session back, and then we sit down in a room and I stick it all up on the screen, and I go, right, what do you want to talk about? And give them a bit of time to dissect which bits of the data they want to talk about, why, and maybe give some context, and then show them some highlights. And we do a reflection that we audio record as part of that as well. So do that right after the session as a hot, or the game as a hot reflection. So something that they would give themselves a green on, something they would do again, something that's an amber, something that they liked but could be done better, and a red, so something that they would go, that really didn't work, or I won't do that again, or something like that. And I'll give them the same as well. So we'll have that at the end of the session, and then after our reflection process as well, because then we're able to take the emotion out of it. We've taken some time. We've both watched the video. We've both gone through data. We're able to maybe have slightly different reflections over time. So all the coaches get that. My aim is to try and do 2 sessions and 2 games with them a season for that. So over like a 10-month period, and try and do that, different types of sessions, different types of games. So that they get that as well as all the other stuff. So that won't happen every single time I'm with them. But that maybe gives us a bit of a different way of going, right, well, if they're aiming to, for example, increase the amount of ball rolling time they've got in their session, they feel that like over a couple of sessions the ball's only been rolling for sort of 60-65% of the session. We look at the data and actually it's around 55. Right, well, what we're going to do about it, here's all the gaps that you had, here's all the stoppages you had, here's all that time, right? That's your focus. Then in a few months' time, let's do another one. Has that figure gone up? So has ball rolling gone up? Have all these other ones come down? Where are we at the end of the season? That's that element of being able to help them around what they want to get better at, but also what we feel they can get better at as a club. So a lot goes into that. I realise I've just talked about that quite a lot, so I apologise. That would be our way of sort of, you said like assessing, but it's more around catching the coaches in and ensuring that they're really focusing on something for their development.
I really like that. Really, really like that. You're also, like, when you think about it, there's no, well, initially when I think about it, I'm like, it's very, very hard to measure a session objectively. But there you give, well, quite a few, and you break it down, and you said data like that. That's very, very interesting. That you can then build awareness again, right?
Yeah, and it's important to remember the context of the session, and also the aim that they were, like the focus that they were going after as well. But because sometimes if you're going after something really specific, somebody might view a session and say, well, they should have coached that bit needed to be better, or that player keeps making that same mistake over and over and over again, and he's not coached him or her. But the reality is that's not their focus at that moment in time. So that we have to understand that everything we do as a coach has a benefit and a trade-off. Every bit of language we use has a benefit and a trade-off. Every bit of intervention has a benefit and a trade-off. So if I intervene and I have a global intervention, I try and affect everybody in that session in one go, the benefit is everybody gets something. Everybody gets something to go on. Everybody gets a bit of information from me as the coach. The trade-off is that that's probably going to take me a little bit longer than it would do normally, because I've got more to say and more to do. The flip side of that is right at the other end, where you give them trial and error. Here you go. Here's the practice. Go and solve problems for me. I want you to achieve this. Benefits, fantastic. Loads of benefits that they get to be able to try things and probably repeat them over and over and over again. And the ball rolling time is really, really high. But what's the trade-off? Now, the quality might not be quite as high. It might be more chaotic. It might be, to the onlooking eye, it might look like you're not coaching. And that's a really difficult thing for some coaches to get their head around, that like from a distance, whether it's the parents that are watching or senior staff that are watching, and whatever environment this is within, might go, why has he just stood there? But the reality is actually what you've done is really skilled, and you've planned things really, really detailed, and you're allowing things to come out. It's difficult to see that without really understanding things. So yeah, that's a big part of trying to understand what the coaches are trying to achieve, allows me to help them with their feedback. So their feedback might look, like you said, when you're looking at all that data and things like that, it might look like it was I don't know, for example, data might be really low in the areas they want to go after, and they might beat themselves up, and they might think that's really negative, and they might think that that's something they've not actually developed the players in. But what about all this other stuff they did? That was brilliant, and they learned loads of stuff here. And so, but likewise, the data could look great, absolutely brilliant, but actually, how many people got better in that session? And that's where the feel comes back into it. The conversations you've got to have, and being able to contextualize things comes back into that. There's never going to be an exact science to coach development. I'm trying being the key word, to blend both together, but it's quite hard.
Yeah, I think a lot of coaches in America especially struggle with that. You said there, sometimes not coaching is great coaching, because of the dynamic of parents and the dynamic of maybe the perception of what great coaching is. Like, can you talk a little bit about that, about like how you would manage that there as a coach, to be like, even though everyone's looking at me here, I gotta.
It's when the spotlight's on and you're in an environment, particularly like you said, when there might be parents or, like I said, senior staff and things like that are on looking, and you feel like they need to see me do something here. That's where the miking people up and having a microphone on really becomes of benefit, because what you can't hear from 100 yards away is that every time that player runs past that coach, he's giving him positive reinforcement, or he's giving him another challenge, or he's recognizing. So noticing is one of the biggest things in coaching for me. Just being able to notice something is so important. One of my coaches here, when I did one of those sessions that I was talking about, there's a bit I clipped up and I shared with him, where he's talking into the microphone about the thing he's about to coach, because it wasn't the right time to coach it. So the thing I loved about that was he noticed it. So I knew that he'd seen what had happened, but he also had the awareness to know that that wasn't the right time to coach it, because it would have upset the flow of the session. It might have then broken down something that would have been really beneficial for some of the other players around that individual. So he just talked into the mic and essentially told me that I've seen it, I'm going to pick it up, I'm going to wait for this to happen. When this happens, and then about 30 seconds later, the ball went out, bang, straight away, straight on that player, talking to him, because it was a slight moment where you had 10 seconds to be able to get that message across. That for me is top level coaching that you can't see from a distance, because all you see from the distance is the bit that needs coaching and somebody not coaching it in theory. So it's so difficult to do, because you can feel like, oh, I need to coach that bit, because if I don't coach that bit, someone's going to say something to me. And that's where I'm trying to be in the role I am, and with the other senior staff within the club, to be able to say, all right, we've seen it, but let's see if they've seen it. And my development comes in if they haven't, further down the line. Now, if I go over and I have a conversation and go, what happened in that last phase of play? I saw that he's tried to turn out on his right foot, whereas actually if he just stayed on his left foot, he had that little slide ball in behind. But I'm just going to pick it up with him now in a moment. Okay, great. That's me. I don't say anything now, because I know he's seen it. Now, if he goes, oh, I'm not sure. What do you mean? Right. Okay, that's a chance for me to help. It's a chance for me to show something. So, it's brave to do as a coach sometimes, because you can feel like you've got to say something, and you've got to be heard, and you've got to be seen. But if you've set your challenges really clearly with the players, either individually, in small groups, collectively as a team, and you allow them to breathe, allow the session to flow a little bit, then you're more than likely going to see that they will get there. It's at what point do you recognize that you're going to have to step in and help? So, really difficult thing to do for coaches to essentially stay quiet. because we, as humans, we want to help sometimes, and sometimes we have to let them help themselves at times. It's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that is skillful coaching there, because again, we've all been assessed on getting your 3 points to get out of there, and then
Yeah.
you've also, like, the youth game. When I think about that, there's a lot of. I wonder, when I look at sessions, if players associate the negative as the coach finding it, whereas, like, for example, if they're doing a build out session and they give the ball away and the coach stops it, they haven't experienced, well, what's the negative here? Like, I'll give the ball away, but terrible thoughts. But if you let it go 10 more seconds, you might concede a goal from it. It's a different feeling. You've experienced what the negative is.
Or we might win the ball back and have another chance to build.
Yeah.
And so, in which point, rather than you having to start from your start point, you actually get a natural point where you start building from, which happens all the time in the game. So, and that's what I mean about recognizing it. So then, if you've recognized, for example, it's gone out to your central defender, he's given the ball away. That's the 5th time he's tried to play that same pass today, and it's been cut out 5 times now. Right now, I need to do something about that as a coach. Now, I need to choose the right intervention style, the right intervention time, the right words that I use, the time in which I do all of that. That level of detail needs to come into it. But that might be the time. I'm not saying you have to wait 5 times. You know different players in different ways. But if you, as you 100% agree with you, if you do that the very first time, how do you know if they were ever going to learn? How do you know if they were going to make that bet? And that's the same for me as a coach developer. If I go over straight away, when I see that happen for the first time and I see a coach not coach it, how do I know that the coach wasn't going to do that next time it happened? How do I know that they haven't learned in that situation? They haven't in their head gone, I could have coached that, couldn't I? Right, okay, I'm going to I'll next time I see that, I'm going to pick that up. And the next time it happens, they pick it up. Then I'm able to go, great, no problem. Like, they're adapting to the situation themselves. There's so many parallels between player development and coach development, but sometimes we feel as coach developers we have to give answers all the time, and we have to almost hold hands. But if we treat them like players, some magical stuff can happen.
Do you know what's interesting there? We're like, how long we're into this conversation? Like, we haven't talked once about, like, build out is the only thing that we've referenced the actual game. But I feel like in a lot of, and I'm not knocking, there's a lot of really, really good stuff in coach education today. But sometimes we look down the road of periodization models and tactical methodology, or whatever you want to call it. But there's literally hundreds of ways that you can make little changes to your coaching. It's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. Look, it's a huge. Well, obviously, the game is the game of football, and we're all in that game because we enjoy it and we enjoy the level of detail within it. And trust me, I could have sat here and spoke to you for the last hour about X's and O's and the way we build and the way we press and the way we try and create, and fantastic. I'd have loved that. Brilliant. But if we as coaches aren't recognizing all this other side of things, then we can have all the knowledge in the world. But if we can't address it, if we can't find a way to communicate it with our players, if we can't connect with our players, if we can't connect with other coaches, then it doesn't matter how knowledgeable you are. It really doesn't. You're not able to actually develop those players. And that's the most important part, is making the players better. And so you have to find a way to do that. And likewise, for someone like me or someone else in another role like me, my thing is to help the coaches get better. If I do that, they find a way to make the players better. The players get better, and then who knows what happens to those players further down the line.
See, when you're looking at, you mentioned there about, well, actually 2 questions. First of all, see when you're looking at coaches coming in and coach recruitment, and maybe you see someone at a grassroots club.
Mm-hmm.
What would jump out to you there about trying to pinpoint someone, a personality or a skill set?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the reason I'm smiling when you ask me is because 2 of my coaches asked me this question yesterday, because we had somebody in for an interview with us yesterday and said, "What are you actually looking for?" And I went, "Okay, we're 10 minutes into this session. I'll ask you, would you give him a job, yes or no?" Now, before all of that, I've been through an application, I've been through a CV, I've done this for a part-time position, I've done a telephone interview, so I've got to know them a little bit over the phone. You're able to obviously find out a lot about people nowadays with the way the world is. But I've had conversation with them on the phone for 20, 25 minutes. 10 minutes in, I knew I was going to offer this person a position within our football club. And I asked our staff without saying that. And I said, would you give him a job? And they said, yes. I said, okay, why? Why would you give him a job? I know more about him than you do. You've seen him literally for 10 minutes. You know his name and you've seen him coach for 10 minutes. You don't know his background, you don't know where he's come from, you don't know anything like that, and you would give him a job. So you tell me. And they said, well, look at the way he's engaging with the players. Look at the way that the session's organised. He's bubbly. He's having fun. He's active. Even when he arrived, when he got there, sounds stupid. He shook everyone's hand. He said hello. He tried to learn names. Like all these things, they're all personality things. They're nothing to do with coaching. They're all about personality. So if you have a certain personality, then you're able to then take on information, you're able to learn, you're able to grow as well. So by being able to get into a position where you're being interviewed for us at a professional football club, you're at a certain level of competency, you would like to think, by the fact you have certain level of qualifications. So you would imagine they would be able to coach at a certain level before they come in. So for me, it's more about who they are. It's about, do they want to learn? Do they want to grow? Do they engage with the people around them? Are they interested in the players? And are they making the players feel special while they're there? The other bits, the X's, the O's, the way the session's designed, the fact that that box could be 5 yards bigger or 5 yards shorter, or it could be that you actually make that session wider, or you do it for a little bit longer in time or a little bit less time, are all things that I can help with. And they're all things that your environment, hopefully, as a coaching unit, helps with as well. So you, of course, looking for a certain level of competency in terms of being able to understand the game and show that they're able to develop players and develop a session and develop a team in a game context. But most importantly, for me, I'm looking for people who want to learn, want to grow, and want to help other people do that same thing. If you can do that, then for me, in a professional football environment, you've got a real opportunity of making something of yourself and the people around you.
Brilliant. Part-time coaches, again, so a little challenge. Last couple, I'm going over my time here, but last couple for you, I promise. Coaches here in the US, when they have the part-time parent coaches and they're talking about CPD and development, sometimes struggle with, they don't have time for that there. And
of course, yeah.
How do you work out that challenge?
Yeah, I'm fortunate. I've worked in the US, so I understand that side of it as well. Obviously, people volunteering their time, and we're obviously fortunate we're able to pay people for that time to come in and do that alongside their full-time employment. Yes, it's always going to be a challenge that you've got. Most people have got a full-time employment role, then another commitment, whether that be part-time or voluntary coaching, have families, have extended families, like to go on holidays, like to play golf or like tennis or whatever they want to do with their life as well. And you want them to do all of those things, of course. Being able to balance that is for, if you're in a more senior role, being able to recognize that and understand that and say, I do understand that, and have some real true empathy with them. I've been working in academy football for a long time, but when I first did, I was working in a pub as well as coaching. So I know how it feels. I do. And so being able to remember that is really important, and show some empathy, being able to take some things off them and be able to take some of the load off them is really important. From a CPD point of view, being able to give them a base to work from. So in terms of, if you want them to work on, you used the build earlier, you want them to build, right? give them 2 or 3 practices or designs that will allow them to be able to put the session on and go. So that, for me, that's my responsibility, someone in my role's responsibility, to be able to go, it could look like this, and then trust them to be able to change that and coach within it and do those sorts of things. But as recognizing that they have other commitments, and whilst this is our full-time employment and we can commit ourselves to it, is really important. There is always going to be a level of commitment that's needed to be able to develop young players or coaches or older players or whatever it is, regardless of what whether it's full-time, part-time, voluntary involvement. If you want to work and be involved within the game, there will be some level of sacrifice. So I talk to everybody a lot about finding harmony. There's this misnomer that we can have work-life balance. Doesn't exist. Nobody, whether it's football or any other industry, work-life balance does not exist. Work-life harmony does, where you can accept that maybe you work a bit too much in some people's eyes because you've got 2 jobs, you've got 3 jobs. But you being okay with that, and your family and your friends around you being okay with that, is what brings you harmony around that. And then you're not feeling like you're being pulled from pillar to post. That takes a lot of time to get to that place as a person, as an individual, to accept that that's what it is. But that's a lot that I talk to the coaches about. Like, please don't try and find work-life balance, because there's people who have been working for 50, 60 years of their life and they never found it. So if you try and find that, you'll always be left wanting. So find something you're comfortable with, find a level of commitment that you're happy with, helps you grow, helps the people around you grow, and really embrace it. And be thankful to the people around you when you're not around for things every now and then, and say thank them for their understanding. That's all you can do, really, for me.
You were at Forest for 4 years, really good reputation as a club, some really good thinkers there and developers there. What were a couple of things that you learned, or what impacted you the most?
It's a good question. I think being part of a club that has such a history of producing young players was fantastic. They've produced players at first team level, international level, Premier League level for the last 30 years. So one of the biggest things I took from being part of that club is that recognizing that you're part of that club. That's really, really important. That it's more than you, that place, and other clubs are as well. When you're across the world, like you are there for a certain period of time to try and contribute to that, but ultimately you're there for that football club. That's what it's about. So that was one of the biggest things for me, that just being able to go, right, well, you've not produced young players for 30 years for no reason. So look at the people around who've been there for a long time. What are they doing? What have they done before they got there as well? That meant that they're still in that environment, and they're also still producing players at the top level. And the other thing for me would be that there was a select few around me within that environment who was like just striving for more all the time, and that thirst for, okay, we're good where we are, but what's next? We're good where we are, but what's next? Right? And so how can we make that little bit better? Oh, wouldn't it be good if we could do that? And doing that on relatively, for a club of that size and stature, on a relatively small provision at times as well. So being able to go, right, well, I can contribute to that. I can contribute to this. This person can help me with this because they're really good at it. So being able to lean on people around you was really, really important for me there. And hopefully they continue to have players that go on and play at various different levels across the world, because that's what that club's built its reputation on.
When did you realise that this was a role that you thought, oh, I'm going to go down this pathway and lean into it a little bit?
For me, I I've been fortunate in that I think in every role I've been in, I've had an element of coach education, coach development within it. So I alluded to time I worked in the US. I worked for New York Red Bulls within their training program, and so being able to support junior coaches and support my parent coaches and things like that, and that was for me, that was 12 years ago now. And so that wasn't the primary function of my role, but like starting doing that there. And then same again in other environments. I worked for the FA in their education department. Whilst I wasn't on the grass with coaches, it was how do I find resources that help coaches get better? At Rotherham, focusing on like the younger age groups and saying how do I help the coaches around me get better and have a bit of pride in those select groups that I have. So we alluded to earlier, we said sort of directors of coaching having 3 or 4 age groups maybe. So I had 4 at Rotherham. So for me, it was about developing those coaches as well as developing the players. And moving more into more bespoke coach development roles at Forest and now at Notts County. I think I've been fortunate that I've had elements of coach development and coach education throughout my pathway over the last sort of 14 years. And I feel like I can have more of an impact by being more strategic and more thought out in the way that I help others than I can if I coach a team to win 3-0 at the weekend. That's how I see things. I think we're here for something bigger than all of us eventually. And so if I can help grow the bigger picture, then the day-to-day stuff will improve as well. And I really enjoy that. So there wasn't ever really a time I went like, I definitely want to go down that coach education route coach development route, I should say, sorry. Because I've been fortunate to do a bit of both all the time. And then, it's probably been the last sort of 5 years where I've really gone like, this is the direction, coach development, really majorly focused on coach development. And I've made that my day to day.
Brilliant. Last one for you. I'm sure there's coaches that are listening, and a lot of the leadership ones that we referenced at the start in those positions that are listening and probably inspired, but also probably taken aback a little bit about the level of detail you're going in and the type of work you're going in, and they're saying, right, well, I want to take all this and go back tonight, and but then they're still looking at the dynamics that we talked about earlier and doing multi roles, all that good stuff. What advice would you have for coaches that are, like where would they start? What would have the biggest gain if you say they could really focus on 1 or 2 things?
For me, focus on who you are to other people and how that is perceived by a variety of different people. Focus on how the players see you, how your co-coaches see you, how other people around you see you, because that will really help who you are ultimately. In terms of as a coach, if you really want to improve as a coach, then coach players and not the practice. And so what I mean by that is not every session needs a brand new design with a brand new pass in practice or a brand new finish in practice or a brand new phase of play within it. If you do the same practice, but you've up your sleeve, you've got these little cards that you can play that change the constraints or change the challenges or change the focus of it. So if it might be 1 week, it's an attacking practice and you concentrate on scoring loads of goals. The next week's the same practice, but you concentrate on the defending. The focus is different. You find yourself coaching players rather than coaching practices, rather than going, now remember, when the ball goes to point A, then point B and C, you become alive and you can do this. And you end up coaching where people go and what people do rather than actually coaching the players. That would be another one that I'd really, really focus on. And finally, spend some time investing in yourself as much as you can. Watching other people as much as you can, talking to other people as much as you can, and being humble in that process and being aware that it doesn't matter whether it's a coach who's coached for 5 days or 50 years, there might be something you can take from them because they might have seen something completely different.
Brilliant. Wow. Great way to finish it. Jake, thank you so much. Outstanding.
Thank you. Really, really appreciate you having me. So thank you very much.